Beginning in this era, we're going to talk about some of the population trends that transpired during this era, some immigration, urban growth, and some nativist consequences that also came about. So, starting with population trends, there are three things that you want to know in relation to the antebellum period, the time before the war. First and foremost, there was a rapid population increase in America at this time, a large movement westward, and a growth in towns and cities where there was a demand for work. And so, if there were factories or if there were other things that had available jobs, people would oftentimes leave their rural situation and move to cities. Um, Death rates around this era reduced, partially because of advancements in healthcare. People weren't necessarily being bloodlet anymore. There were some other medical and scientific advances around this time that made improvements that weren't great, especially compared to today, but they were certainly better than they were. And that's something to take away. Also, birth rates were still pretty high around this era. Women were still largely at home. The average white woman typically had over 6 kids. That's a lot. So nowadays you have most women having between 2 and 3 kids. Uh, 6 is quite a lot. Okay, so that was something in 1840 to keep in mind. Women were still having more and more kids. So you have rapid population increases, people moving to cities, higher life expectancy, and higher birth rates still. Okay, so that was definitely something to keep track of as far as trends are concerned. As far as immigration, the 1840s and early 1850s was a significant boom time in immigration, specifically from Ireland and from Germany. You had a number of immigrants who left those countries for various different reasons. Um, the Irish typically came to the United States in the decade of the 1840s and early 1850s, largely due to a massive potato famine in Ireland that caused mass starvation, hunger, and people looking to leave due to rotted crops and things along those lines that spread disease, spread hunger. You have a significant population of Irish people that left. Today, as it stands, more people of Irish descent live outside of Ireland than Ireland itself. Okay, and that's something that affects us to this day. But in the era of the 1840s and 1850s, it really affected the United States, largely because Irish immigrants were flooding eastern American cities, New York, Boston. If you ever wonder how Boston gets its significant Irish heritage, the Celtics, South Boston Irish, um, that's largely because of the decade of the 1840s and early 1850s, where you saw mass immigration to eastern cities. So Irish immigrants were leaving around that time. German immigrants largely left Germany, partially because their wheat crop suffered. Okay, so you have a lot of German immigrants who left around that time. You have a lot of German immigrants who left due to various different political unrest and other reasons where they wanted to succeed. If you've ever been through various different Texas towns that have kind of a German name, Fredericksburg, New Braunfels, Munster, towns like that, you have a number of different towns in Texas that were settled in the era of the 1840s and 1850s by immigrants coming from Germany. Many of them were wealthy, and many of them left to escape unrest or otherwise famine type situations. But you do have a significant German influence in the state of Texas. And so you have towns that were established by German immigrants. Okay? Other Germans left because they may have been Jewish and they were leaving persecuted situations where they were persecuted for their religious beliefs or whatnot. Most of those German Jews moved somewhere to the northwest, or otherwise, though, all German immigrants typically congregated places around the current modern day Midwest, around Chicago, places like that. But you do see a significant influence in Texas. That's awesome. Okay, so keep that in mind as you drive through New Braunfels, or if you've ever been to Green Hall, or drive through Munster, Texas, or Fredericksburg out in the hill country. Those are all German towns. Okay. So you have a significant German and Irish flood of immigrants in the decade of the 1840s and 1850s. And it affected America's population. And because of it, you also saw a rise in nativism that stemmed from Americans fearing immigrants. You see this today, some xenophobic ideology that affects how immigrants are viewed. But in this particular era of the 1840s and 1850s, Americans largely feared immigrants because they feared that it would change the fabric of the America. More specifically, a lot of these nativists feared the idea that the Irish immigrants and many of the German immigrants who were Catholic would compete with Protestant America. They would increase the influence, if you will, of the Catholic Church. And that was a big no no for a lot of people who really vehemently stood against the Catholic Church. So, that is something that natives feared as far as immigration is concerned. Many Americans also feared that many of these new incoming immigrants would have different political views and would change the political fabric and demand to change the political fabric of our country. So these are some things that came about at this time. Okay, nativism, that belief in superiority of native born inhabitants over immigrants. And it was driven largely by fear of change. You see this today. This is nothing new in American history. It stems back all the way from our colonial days, and it affects us to this day. The modern immigration movement is different than what was seen in around the 1840s. However, fear of change and fear of people who are different, that's nothing new in American history. So take that with you.